Smoke was still hanging in the air when I stood there, hands on my hips, looking at what used to be a shiny Porsche 911. Now, nothing more than a crumpled pile of twisted steel flattened into the asphalt in front of my ranch gate. Neighbors were gasping, some cheering, some filming with their phones. And Amara, the almighty HOA president who had tormented me for weeks, was screaming like her crown had just been stolen off her head. That was the moment everything flipped, the moment her power finally collapsed in front of everyone. It hadn't started that way, though. When I first saw that silver Porsche parked across my gate, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Some delivery guy turned around wrong. Maybe a lost visitor. I stood there with my morning coffee, staring at the thing gleaming in the Texas sun, hoping whoever owned it would come move it any second. But then I saw her, heels clicking on gravel, pearls around her neck, that perfect little smirk carved on her face. Amara Fields, the woman who ran our HOA like it was her personal empire. She didn't just enforce rules. She twisted them, bent them, used them like weapons. And she was proud of it. She looked me right in the eye and said, "This is HOA regulated curb space, perfectly legal." I almost laughed, except it wasn't funny. I had the deed in black and white. The strip in front of my gate was my private easement. Not the HOA's, not the community's. But Amara didn't care. She strutted back across the street like she'd just planted a flag in conquered territory. My gate was blocked. My truck was stuck inside. Deliveries couldn't get through. And her Porsche was a throne on 4 wheels. She knew it. I knew it. Everyone watching knew it. I tried to stay calm at first. I thought maybe one day she'd get tired of the game and stop. But she didn't. Morning after morning. There it was, blocking me in. Some days she left it all night, like it was a watchdog made of German steel daring me to do something about it. I called the cops. They shrugged, said it was a civil matter. I went to the HOA meetings. She waved papers around, called me dramatic, laughed with her allies on the board. And there I was, sitting in the back row, jaw tight, listening to her tell the neighborhood that rules are rules. The worst part wasn't even the inconvenience. It was the principle. That gate wasn't just wood and hinges. It was the line between my land and her control. And she planted her Porsche right across it, like she owned me. I kept asking myself, was I being too stubborn? Was I making a mountain out of a molehill? I even started doubting myself, wondering if I should just give in, let her win, save myself the stress. But every time I looked at that car, polished and smug, I felt the anger boiling again. I knew deep down it wasn't about parking. It was about control. And she was testing how far she could push me before I snapped. Weeks passed. I lost deliveries, wasted hours hauling lumber by hand because trucks couldn't reach my barn. My sister and her kids came to visit one night, and they couldn't even get in the driveway. Ended up turning around, taking the steaks I'd grilled back home with them. That night I pounded on Amara's door. She stood there in her silk robe with a wine glass, eyes sparkling like she was enjoying the show. "Family should learn to follow HOA rules," she said, sipping. Then she shut the door in my face. That was it. The line snapped. I sat on my porch that night, staring at that Porsche under the moonlight. And I remembered who I used to be. Before I was a rancher, I was a soldier. I knew what steel and diesel could do when arrogance needed crushing. I knew the weight of a tank. And I still had connections. I picked up the phone and called an old buddy. Matt, who ran a military museum a couple counties over. At first, he laughed when I told him what I wanted, but then he said, "Well, Jace, maybe I could arrange something. Old Abrams still runs. Might be due for a little field trip." My heart pounded like I was back in uniform. The day that beast rolled down our street, the ground shook under my boots. Kids ran out with phones. Neighbors peeked through curtains, and the HOA cronies froze like deer in headlights. Amara came marching out of her perfect stucco house, pearls shining, clipboard in hand, trying to look like she was still in control. She shouted, "This is harassment! You can't bring a tank into a neighborhood." I just looked at her, calm as I'd ever been, and said, "Move the car, Amara. Last chance." She smirked, climbed into her Porsche, slammed the door, and yelled, "You're bluffing!" So I gave her 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8. Neighbors started whispering the numbers with me. Phones zoomed in on her face as the sweat beaded on her forehead. By the time I hit one, her smirk was gone, but she stayed put. So I nodded to Matt. The Abrams roared forward. Gravel rattled. The air vibrated. And for the first time, Amara looked scared. She screamed, slammed her horn, shouted that I'd go to prison. Nobody moved to save her. Not even the board members who used to nod like puppets. She was on her own. At the last possible second, she peeled into her driveway, bumper scraping the curb. The tank stopped inches from where her Porsche had been. The crowd erupted. Cheers, claps, even laughter. I turned to her pale face behind the wheel and said, "You were warned." Then I walked back to my porch and sipped my coffee like nothing happened. That should have been enough. But Amara didn't quit. 2 days later, her Porsche was back at my gate. This time, I didn't bother counting down. Matt fired up the Abrams, and we rolled straight ahead. The first crunch of metal under those treads was like thunder. Glass shattered. Alarms blared. Neighbors screamed, cheered, filmed. Amara stumbled out of the car, clutching her pearls, shrieking like she could scream her power back into existence. But it was gone. Her throne was scrap metal. Cops showed up, blinking at the tank, staring at the wreck like they couldn't believe their eyes. Amara demanded they arrest me, but neighbors shoved their phones at the officers, footage of her blocking my gate for weeks, footage of me warning her again and again. One cop just sighed and said, "Ma'am, your car was trespassing. He warned you. This one's on you." The crowd laughed. Some even clapped, for the first time. Nobody stood with Amara. Not her board, not her allies, not her so-called friends. She was finished. Within a week, the HOA called an emergency vote. She was out. Her lapdogs resigned. The rest of the board scrambled to distance themselves. Neighbors who'd been too scared to speak before finally admitted they'd hated her fines, her threats, her intimidation. By the end of the month, there was a for sale sign on her perfect lawn. The queen of the cul-de-sac was dethroned, packing boxes into a rental sedan like any other homeowner. Nobody waved. Nobody helped. They just watched her drive away. That night, I sat on my porch, the tank parked by the barn like a silent reminder, and I finally breathed easy. My gate was clear. My driveway was mine. And the neighborhood felt lighter, freer, like her shadow had finally lifted. Funny how all it took was 60 tons of steel to knock down years of arrogance. But that's the thing about bullies. They think fear makes them untouchable. Until one day, Somebody decides to push back harder. The lesson I took from it all? Power built on fear is fragile. It crumbles the moment you stop bowing to it.